Just bear with me, I'm a little bit nervous here today. Not nervous, but... First of all, thank you for being with us here today to honor my hubby, Major Sidney Langford. Just going to share some scripture from Proverbs 3, 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek his will to all you do. And he will show you which path to take. Now, Sid learned that path years ago, from his childhood to his senior years. A little card that I received a long time ago really spoke to my heart, and as I was preparing for this day, I thought of Sid, and this is what it says. I shall not pass this way again. Any good thing I can do, or any kindness I can show, let me not defer it, nor neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. Sid's last marching order was from the Army, and it was to Booth Memorial Hospital in Flushing, New York. He was assigned there as chaplain. For 4 years he was there, retiring in 1991. He was well liked, as you will see as I share some of the comments expressed to him by staff members as they had worked together, side by side. This one says, "We will never forget all you did for us during your chaotic, hectic days in the ER. As I said before, you have truly touched the hearts of many, not only patients, but staff as well. We will miss your kindness and humor, and most of all, please remember us." I will always remember the day you went and got us jelly beans. You got those jelly beans because we couldn't even wait for our food to come. You always were positive to our needs and those of the patients. And you helped us to see that we needed to endure, persevere, and to care. It has been my joy and pleasure to have known you, to have worked with you. You always cared for the staff and the patients. I will never forget you saying over and over again, "Honey, honey." He worked with a female staff, I want you to know. So he was allowed that. I appreciate everything you've done for us. I pray that God will bless you in your retirement. Another one says, "I hope this gift will bring you a lot of happiness. We miss you. We miss you, and your gift of kindness will always be in our hearts. May God bless and keep you in his protected hands, and may he keep you safe always." Dear Major, we will miss you and never forget you. Best wishes and love. We know that in life, he did that, doing good and knowing loving and showing kindness. He followed the path that God had planned for him. It started way back when he was just a child. And it says in the Bible that God knows your beginnings and your ends. God had planned for him, as we have read in the scriptures today. We sing a song, "By the pathway of duty flows the river of God's grace." And I know that God led him all the way. The last comment of one of the staff members was simply, "Farewell, we love you." So Sid, farewell, we all love you, I love you. Thank you. Bye. Get out of here. Jump.
Thank you for allowing me a few moments to share a few memories of my grandfather, who we call lovingly Papa. Possibly my fondest memories, my sister and I were talking about these over the last few days, but it became a tradition for our family to head up to the Lordship Beach, Maine in the summers. So my mom, father, Katie, Papa, and our grandmother would always spend about a week or so up in the Lordship Beach, Maine. Maine in the summer is beautiful. Being up there with our family was just kind of one of those family traditions that became really special for our whole family. We spent our days on Pop-Pop's moped, going to the beach. He'd buy us ice cream on the boardwalk, and then we'd sleep under the stars at his campsite in Old Orchard. He was happy and willing to fill our days with fun and adventure. For about 75, 80-year-old man, he had a lot of energy, especially dealing with two kids. So I grew to appreciate that very much. I also bugged him pretty much incessantly to play baseball with me in the backyard. He never said no. And it was something that we did all the time. And then it became a tradition that was passed on to my father and I. So then he got the annoying request to play baseball every day too. He never said no either, so I appreciate that as well. I love the game of golf, and I know there's been some pictures of Pop-Up playing golf, and I've had a chance to speak to a few of you about playing golf. And I got my love of golf from Pop-Up. He was the first person I played on a course with, although my dad had taught me previously, brought me to the driving range. But Pop-Up and I played many, many rounds together. And it had been a few years. The last time I played with him, I think I was about 20. He was 81 or 82. And I had been playing a lot with my friends. So I thought, I'm going to go down to Florida. I had never beaten him before, and I'm going to beat Pop-Up at golf. So I'm about 20 years old. I'm feeling pretty limber. I had been playing a lot of golf, so I was feeling pretty good about my game. I'm in no way good at golf, but I just enjoy playing. So 20-year-old kid, I get up there, and I just crush my tee shot. I'm feeling really good, and I'm like, try to answer that, old man. Well, Pop-Up got up there. It could have been a sand wedge or a driver. Pop-Up never hit a golf shot where the ball went higher than about this. So I'm thinking, I got this in the bag. The old man goes down today. Well, I can't explain how it happened, but at the end of the round, he had me by about 7 or 8 strokes. And I remember on the final green, he kind of gave me this little grin, like, you have a lot to learn, young man. And I did. And Pop-Up taught me a lot. Pop-Up was a meticulous man. Whether it was his shoes or his cars, everything was always shining and in tip-top shape. Now, I might be setting myself up for a uniform inspection by saying this, but no military training could provide me the ability to shine my shoes as good as Pop-Up could shine. So whenever he saw me in uniform, or even if he didn't, he would always go say, go get those boots, go get those shoes. And I'd bring him down all my shoes and boots, and he'd spend hours shining them for me. And that's just kind of how he was, helpful and kind to his family. It was this attention to detail, Pop-Pop's love of country and naval aviation, and his picture in his uniform in my childhood home that inspired me to join the Navy as he had. So I want to thank him for that inspiration. It's obviously had an impact on my life. This picture has also been on the slideshow a bit, but I asked him to give me my first salute when I was commissioned as an officer, and I was honored and humbled that he came all the way up to Boston and did that for me on the USS Constitution. It was kind of that special moment for he and I, and it was just an honor for me. Finally, I wanted to thank all of you, his Salvation Army family, for being there for Pop-Pop for so many years. Our family is scattered all over the country, but we always felt moved and supported that he had a whole congregation that he could call family in his Salvation Army family. He loved this church, and he loved all of you. So again, I want to thank you for being there for him when his family was so far away. I'd also like to thank my father, and especially my Uncle Steve and his wife Pat, for all the love and support that they showed Pop-Pop when he needed it the most. Finally, thank you, Pop-Pop, for teaching us the true meaning of love, family, and devotion to God. Thank you.
The greatest thing about my dad to me was he never forgot where he came from. I was teasing with Mrs. Irwin before the service started. My mom is from Bucyrus, Ohio. My father was from Steubenville, Ohio. Can't get much more classier places than those two. You know that there's three famous people that came out of Steubenville. There's Dean Martin, an alcoholic, Jimmy the Greek, a bookie, and Dick Langford, a Salvation Army officer. My dad was always where God wanted him to be. And he taught us about what it means to be humble and to work hard and respect everyone. My grandmother and the soldiers and Corps officers of the Steubenville Corps ingrained in my father a deep conviction for him to serve the lost. Many of you know my dad spent quite a few years as a Corps officer. One of the things that was interesting to us as kids is back in those days, in the good old Army, we had assistant officers. These poor single women that got a letter that said, "You're now moving into the Langford family." 3 boys, and my dad and my mom, and we must have had, at one point, I don't know, I can't remember whether it was 4 or 5 single women officers stationed in Hamilton, Ohio, with my parents as Corps officers at the same time. Many times when there were officers that were taking a short break from officership, DHQ would call Dad and Mom, and the next thing you know, one of us would be sharing a bedroom, or 2 of us would be rearranged, and that new person would move. I remember one time coming home from school, and somebody was sitting in the living room. I had no idea who they were, and walked into the kitchen, and I said to Mom, "Who's the guy in the living room?" And it was an officer who was going to come and stay with us for a while. I think my dad might hold a record in the Eastern Territory for Sunday school attendance. With Commissioner then the DYS, Captain Andy Miller, in Hamilton, Ohio, for Easter Sunday, we had 608 in Sunday school with the New Miami Outpost and the Hamilton Corps. I remember my dad, and everybody's talked about how neat he was and all that. One time my dad came up and asked, I think Rick and I were the older 2, because the men's club was going all night fishing. My dad didn't like all night. My dad didn't like fishing. But that was in Piqua, Ohio, and I remember us going out fishing all night with the men's club. And when we moved to Hamilton, I mean, I wasn't really that old, but I think if I would have thought, well, we're never going to go night fishing again. That's over with. But the men of the Piqua Corps liked it so much that it became a part of the Hamilton, Ohio Corps. And we used to go all night fishing, and we would catch toads in the New Miami River. Exciting places, I told you that. One of the, I said, and first I have to thank, there's many people here today from Lake Magdalene United Methodist Church, which is the church Pat and I attend. And the staff there heard this already once. But you saw one of the pictures was my dad and Louis Armstrong. My dad was speaking at a Rotary Club or a Kiwanis Club or something, and they had left the doors to the ballroom open, and Louis Armstrong was coming to Wilmington, Delaware that night to have a concert. And while his entourage was checking him in, Louis Armstrong walked over to see what was going on in the ballroom and heard my dad talking to the Rotary about the work of the Salvation Army and about my dad's ministry there in Wilmington. Louis Armstrong, once he got, the people came back and said, "We have your room," he said to his staff, "When that man's done, I want to talk to him." And after it was over, my dad met him in the ballroom, and Louis Armstrong said, "I just wanted you to know how blessed I was by what you said, and I want to know if there's anything I can do today to help the Salvation Army." And that picture of Louis Armstrong and my dad is because of that. My dad was a great Corps officer. My dad was a great pastor. My dad was smart enough to take his pastoring with him when he went to headquarters appointments or the ARC command. Now, I will tell you an interesting story, and you guys from Lake Mag know I'm having trouble standing still. I think I'm going to walk around. But there was a Christmas wreath in the office in the Syracuse area command. And, as appointments go, my parents showed up there July 1st, and this brown, ugly wreath was still hanging in the office. And my dad, one of his policies when he was a Corps officer, and what he told me when I was a Corps officer and an officer, was don't change anything the first 6 months. So that ugly wreath hung there from Christmas until July when my dad got there, and my dad hated that wreath because it kept dropping leaves or needles all over the place. And we've heard about my dad. He wouldn't let it stay there. He'd have to clean it up. And so then the next Christmas came, and the lady, I guess, who was responsible to put the new wreath, brought a new wreath, and she put it up. And it lasted through Christmas season. And like the day after Christmas, I think, my dad was in there, took it down, threw it away. And the woman came up to him and she said, "Well, when Ernie Payton, Major Ernie Payton, some of you might know him, he was the one before my dad, he hung it up there, and it was like a symbol to him." And my dad says, "Well, we left it there for a while, so it's done now." But that's just the kind of thing, that drove my dad crazy, those pine needles falling all over the place. My dad was probably another historical thing about my dad. My dad's the first person to ever be in the New York staff band that couldn't play a horn and couldn't sing. That's if anybody in here is a staff bandsman, they know that's the truth. He was asked one time to go and help when they needed a flag bearer or something, and he went. And then they were talking to him, and they asked him if he wanted to stay, and he became the secretary of the New York staff band. And Tom Mack, God bless Tom Mack, asked my dad, "Well, why don't you just, when the men's chorus sing, just come up and stand along and sing with us?" And so my dad would sing with the male chorus. But the band and chorus sort of got back to him whenever they took a trip, because if he was the secretary of the band, it would be my dad's job to count people as they got back on the bus to make sure that everybody was present and accounted for. Well, when they were in England for one of the tours, the bus they had two doors, a front door and a back door. So my dad stood by the front door, 1, 2, counting everybody. As the band is going out the back door, coming around the side of the bus, going in the front door again. So all of a sudden, my dad's trying to, he's like counting, and he realizes he's beyond whatever the 40 numbers of the band was, and something obviously was wrong. They used to sing and call him El Cid. That's, I guess, a movie or something, and that there was a song about El Cid, so they would sing that whenever he would try to get tough with him as being the secretary of the band. They would just sit in the back of the bus and starting to sing. But my dad loved the privilege of being in the New York staff band. Elaine spoke about the hospital when Dad was the chaplain there at the hospital. The worst thing in the world was to go to that hospital with my dad. They lived across the street on Flushing Avenue from the hospital. A 5-minute walk you could be from the apartment they lived in to standing in my dad's office in the chaplain's office. It would take a half hour to get from the house, from the apartment, to anywhere in the hospital, because we had to say hello to everybody in the parking lot when we walked through the parking lot, then everybody in anywhere in the hallway. Then we had to go to the chemotherapy department just because he wanted to make sure everybody that was in there had somebody with them to sit with them during their time in chemo. And he knew everybody by name. My dad could never get Scott and I and Rick straight. But the parking attendant at Booth Memorial Medical Center, he knew his name the first time he saw him. The Salvation Army played a significant role in my dad's life. And many of you would identify him through that role. It wasn't the Salvation Army that influenced my dad. It was my dad that influenced the Salvation Army. The other thing my dad always taught us is we were the Salvation Army. It wasn't somebody at THQ or DHQ. It wasn't somebody in the Corps next to us. When I was a Corps officer, he always told me that it was my responsibility, that I was the Salvation Army. And he loved the Army, and he gave every opportunity, and he took every opportunity the Salvation Army gave him to serve. The other thing that I'll tell you that I've struggled with for the last 2 years, before Dad passed, is that those of us in the Langford family lost the strongest person we ever knew. We watched my father deteriorate to where he was because of Lewy body dementia and what it did to him. One of the reasons we celebrate today is my dad's that strong guy again. All that's gone for the last couple of years, all that we've gone through together is gone now, and he's at peace with his God, and in that we are extremely blessed. But back to that strong thing. My dad used to wrestle Scott, Rick, and I. Rick's not here. My older brother passed away about 8 years ago. But Dad would wrestle us, and he would get 2 of us in a scissor lock with his legs, and the other with his arms, and giving you a noogie on the top of your head. And Mom would be yelling, somebody's going to get hurt or somebody's going to break something all the time. But the 3 of us, just like Matt said about golf with wrestling, we couldn't beat my dad. People have already talked about Lakeside and how important that was to the Langford family and our vacations there. A nice United Methodist campgrounds, Pastor Brent, that we used to go to. Think of that. But then we had the boat. We had so many things. I'll tell you another great story I like about Scott's wedding. Scott's wedding, I think Rick was supposed to hand Dad the engagement ring, and Dad took his ceremony book and he had it open like this, and Rick was supposed to put the ring in it, and Dad, instead of holding it like this, was holding it like that. So as Rick put the ring on the ceremony book, it proceeded to roll off, hit the marble floor, and roll like 15 feet away, making this wonderful noise throughout the whole church, and everybody's standing like, okay, now what do we do? And Rick had to go find the ring, pick it up, and bring it back so he could continue. I don't know, Cheryl, maybe he was trying to say something. As a boy in high school, having to move, my parents found out they were moving from Wilmington, Delaware to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the night of the all-sports banquet. And my mom went to this banquet. My mom and dad went to the banquet. And the whole time we were there, my mom was crying. And I'm thinking, oh, my mom is so proud of me. Look at her crying. Only to find out that DHQ had called that day and told Dad and Mom that they were moving. And my poor mother had to sit through a sports banquet where I was made, I'm bragging, the sophomore athlete of the year. And the coaches stood up and told about how great it was going to be for me to be there for the next 2 years. A recruit from Villanova University was there to look at a couple of us from the school, and everything looked wonderful. And then we got home, and if you're an officer's kid, here's the words that you dread. And it was to us, it was, boys, Mom and I need to talk to you down in the living room. First of all, Mom never let us sit in the living room. So we knew that that meant we were moving. And because of that, I took as you can well imagine, quite a fit. Wasn't going to move, wasn't going to do anything, blah, 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 blah. And it went on. The next year during football season, I was making tackles, and my dad and Mom were sitting in the parents section, and somebody kept saying, who's that 60? Who's that number 60? Where'd he come from? We don't know who this is. And my dad said, oh, that's my son. And as soon as we got home that night, my mom pulled me aside and told me how proud Dad was of me and how he said, that's my son. The Sunday where we realized from the doctors that Dad was heading into hospice and there was just a few hours left was the same Sunday that I was appointed as the assistant pastor of Lake Magdalene United Methodist Church. An amazing, amazing journey that's been fascinating. And I got to talk to Dad about that, and he wasn't talking back much then. But my prayer is that he knows that. And when he knew that, the words he said was, that's my son. And I thank him so much for helping me to be the Christian man he has called me to be. Now I'll tell you one last story. Maybe you didn't have this problem, but I know we did growing up. My dad would go to the store and he'd buy a piece of clothing. And he'd bring it home, or a pair of shoes, and he would say to you, do you like these shoes? Now, you didn't want to say, no, Dad, that's an old man's pair of shoes. I would never wear those. So you would say, oh, yeah, those are really nice, Dad. Well, the next day, he'd bring home a pair for you. Shirt, whatever it was. So we learned real quick, not to, especially as teenagers. You're a little kid, it doesn't really matter. But when you're a teenager and he brings you home that pair of shoes, it's just not going to happen. But see, that's the kind of man my dad was. Even when he bought something for himself, he was thinking of others. He was thinking of his boys. And for that, the people sitting here in the front will always be grateful that we can say, that's my dad.